So as everyone knows, today is the one-day anniversary of uh, Ramnavami. And yesterday we read um, from chapter 10 of the ninth Canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And so today I want to read chapter 11 so that we can continue from where we left off yesterday and complete our experience of hearing about Lord Ramachandra. Um, and so I'll begin with reading some verses and purports, and then if anybody else feels inspired to read, then you can also read. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vishaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prachadane Nirishesha Punyavadi Pastyatcha Desha. So again, we'll be reading chapter 11 of the ninth canto, and I'll begin with reading the summary given. The chapter is titled Lord Ramachandra Rules the World. So Prabhupada writes, this chapter describes how Lord Ramachandra resided in Ayodhya with his younger brothers and performed various sacrifices. Lord Ramachandra, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, performed various sacrifices by which to worship himself, and at the end of these sacrifices, he gave land to the Hota, Advaryu, Udgat, and Brahma priests. He gave them the eastern, western, northern, and southern directions, respectively, and the balance he gave to the Acharya. Lord Ramachandra's faith in the Brahmins and affection for his servants was observed by all the Brahmins, who then offered their prayers to the Lord and returned whatever they had taken from him. They regarded the enlightenment given to them by the Lord within the core of their hearts as a sufficient contribution. Lord Ramachandra subsequently dressed himself like an ordinary person and began wandering within the capital to understand what impression the citizens had of him. By chance, one night he heard a man talking to his wife, who had gone to another man's house. In the course of rebuking his wife, the man spoke suspiciously of the character of Sita Devi. The Lord immediately returned home and, fearing such rumors, he superficially decided to give up Sita Devi's company. Thus he banished Sita Devi, who was pregnant, to the shelter of Valmiki Muni, where she gave birth to twin sons named Lava and Kusha. In Ayodhya, Lakshman begot two sons named Angada and Chitraketu. Bharat begot two sons named Taksha and Pukshala. And Shatrughna begot two sons named Subahu and Shrutasena. When Bharat went out to conquer various lands on behalf of the emperor, Lord Ramachandra, he fought many millions of Gandharvas. By killing them in the fight, he acquired immense wealth, which he then brought home. Shatrughna killed a demon named Lavana at Madhuvan, and thus established the capital of Mathura. Meanwhile, Sita Devi placed her two sons in the care of Valmiki Muni and then entered into the earth. Upon hearing this, Lord Ramachandra was very much aggrieved, and thus he performed various sacrifices for 13,000 years. After describing the pastimes of Lord Ramachandra's disappearance and establishing that the Lord appears for his pastimes only, Shukadeva Goswami ends this chapter by describing the results of hearing about the activities of Lord Ramachandra, and by describing how the Lord protected his citizens and displayed affection for his brothers. So we'll begin with text 1. Shri Shuka Uvacha Bhagavanatmanam Rama Uttama Kalpakai Sarvadeva Mayam Devam Ishitakar Yavan Makai. Translation. Shukadeva Goswami said, thereafter, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Ramachandra, accepted an acharya and performed sacrifices, yagyas, with opulent paraphernalia. Thus, he himself worshipped himself, for he is the Supreme Lord of all demigods. Sarvahanam Achyuteja. If Achyutya, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is worshipped, then everyone is worshipped, as stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 31, Text 14. As pouring water on the root of a tree nourishes the trunk, branches, twigs, and leaves, and as supplying food to the stomach enlivens the senses and the limbs of the body, worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead satisfies the demigods who are part of the Supreme Personality. Performing yagya involves worshipping the Supreme Lord. Here the Supreme Lord worshipped the Supreme Lord. Therefore it is said, Bhagavan Atmanatmanam Ije. The Lord worshipped himself by himself. This does not, of course, justify the Mayavad philosophy by which one thinks himself the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The jiva, the living entity, is always different from the Supreme Lord. The living entities, Bibi Namsha, never become one with the Lord, although Mayavadis sometimes imitate the Lord's worship of himself. Lord Krishna meditated upon himself every morning as a grahastra, and similarly, Lord Ramachandra performed yagyas to satisfy himself. But this does not mean that an ordinary living being should imitate the Lord by accepting the process of ahangraha upasana. Such unauthorized worship is not recommended herein. Hotridada disham prachim brahmane dakshinam prabhu advaryave pratichim va utaram samagayasa. Translation. Lord Ramachandra gave the entire east to the Hota priest, the entire south to the Brahma priest, the west to the Advaryu priest, and the north to the Udgata priest, the reciter of the Samaveda. In this way, he donated his kingdom. Acharyaya dadau shesham yavati bhustadantara manyamana idam kritsnam brahmano rati nikshpriha. Thereafter, thinking that because the Brahmins have no material desire, they should possess the entire world, Lord Ramachandra delivered the land between the east, west, north, and south to the Acharya. Ityayam tadalankara vasobhyam avasheshita tataragyapi vaidehi saumangalyavasheshita. After thus giving everything in charity to the Brahmins, Lord Ramachandra retained only his personal garments and ornaments, and similarly, the queen Mother Sita was left with only her nose ring and nothing else. Te tu brahmana devasya vatsalyam vikshya samstutam pritaklina diyastasmai pratyarpyedam bhava shrire. All the Brahmins who were engaged in the various activities of the sacrifice were very pleased with Lord Ramachandra, who was greatly affectionate and favorable to the Brahmins. Thus, with melted hearts, they returned all the property received from him and spoke as follows. So, purport. In the previous chapter, it was said that the prajas, the citizens, strictly followed the system of varnashram dharma. The Brahmins acted exactly like Brahmins, the Kshatriyas exactly like Kshatriyas, and so on. Therefore, when Lord Ramachandra gave everything in charity to the Brahmins, being qualified, wisely considered that Brahmins are not meant to possess property to make a profit from it. The qualifications of a Brahmin are given in Bhagavad Gita 18:42. Shamodama stapa shaucham kshantirarjavam evacha jnanam vijnanam astikyam brahmakarma swabhavajam. Peacefulness, self-control, austerity, purity, tolerance, honesty, wisdom, knowledge, and religiousness. These are the qualities by which Brahmins work. The Brahminical character offers no scope for possessing land and ruling citizens. These are the duties of a kshatriya. Therefore, although Brahmins did not refuse Lord Ramachandra's gift, after accepting it, they returned it to the king. The Brahmins were so pleased with Lord Ramachandra's affection toward them that their hearts melted. They saw that Lord Ramachandra, aside from being the Supreme Personality of Godhead, was fully qualified as a kshatriya and was exemplary in character. One of the qualifications of a kshatriya is to be charitable. A kshatriya or ruler levies taxes upon the citizens not for his personal sense gratification, but to give charity in suitable cases. Dhanam Ishvara Bhava. On one hand, kshatriyas have the propensity to rule, but on the other, they are very liberal with charity. When Maharaj Yudhishthir gave charity, he engaged Karna to take charge of distributing it. Karna was very famous as Datta Karna. The word Datta refers to one who gives charity very liberally. The king always kept a large quantity of food grains in stock, and whenever there was any scarcity of grains, they would distribute grains in charity. A kshatriya's duty is to give charity, and a brahmin's duty is to accept charity, but not more than needed to maintain body and soul together. Therefore, when the Brahmins were given so much land by Lord Ramachandra, they returned it to him and were not greedy. Would anybody else like to read? We are reading from Canto 9, Chapter 11, and we are on Text 6.
I'm good. I can read.
Okay, Len?
Apatana svaya kimnu Bhagavan Bhuvaneshvara Yanantaridayam Vishya Tamohamsi Svarochisha. O Lord, you are the master of the entire universe. What have you not given to us? You have entered the core of our hearts and dissipated the darkness of our ignorance by your effulgence. This is the supreme gift. We do not need a material donation. Purport. When Dhruva Maharaj was offered a benediction by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he replied, quote, "O my Lord, I am fully satisfied. I do not need any material benediction." Similarly, when Prahlad Maharaj was offered a benediction by Lord Narasimhadev, he also refused to accept it and instead declared that a devotee should not be like a vanik, a mercantile man who gives something in exchange for some profit. One who becomes a devotee for some material profit is not a pure devotee. Brahmanas are always enlightened by the Supreme Personality of Godhead within the heart. Sarvasya chaham ridi sanivishto mata smirtir jnanam apahanam cha. And because the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas are always directed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they are not greedy for material wealth. What is absolutely necessary they possess. What is absolutely necessary they possess, but they do not want an expanded kingdom. An example of this was given by Vamanadev. Acting as a brahmachari, Lord Vamanadev wanted only 3 paces of land. Aspiring to possess more and more for personal sense gratification is simply ignorance. And this ignorance is conspicuous by its absence from the heart of a Brahmana or a Vaishnava. Keep going?
You're welcome to keep going if you'd like to keep going.
Okay, I'll read another. Text 7. We're in Canto 9, Chapter 11. Text 7. Namo Brahmanya Devaya Ramaya Kunta Medase Uttamashloka Duryaya Yastadanda Pitangaya Graye. Translation. O Lord, you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who have accepted the Brahmanas as your worshipable deity. Your knowledge and memory are never disturbed by anxiety. You are the chief of all famous persons within this world, and your lotus feet are worshipped by sages who are beyond the jurisdiction of punishment. O Lord Ramachandra, let us offer our respectful obeisances unto you. Karachio loka gyanyasur guru vatriam alakshita charambacho srinad ramo Bharyamudishya Kasyachit. Sukadev Goswami continued. Once, while Lord Ramachandra was walking at night incognito, hiding himself by a disguise to find out the people's opinion of himself, he heard a man speaking unfavorably about his wife, Sita Devi. Text 9. Naham bibarmi tvam dustam asatim paraveshma gam Streno hi bibrayatachitam Ramanaham bhaje puna. Speaking to his unchaste wife, the man said, You go to another man's house, and therefore you are unchaste and polluted. I shall not maintain you any more. A henpecked husband like Lord Rama may accept a wife like Sita who went to another man's house, but I'm not henpecked like him. Therefore, I shall not accept you again. Text 10. Iti lokad bahu mukad duraradhyad ashambida patyabitena sadvakta prapta pracheta sashranam. Shukadev Goswami said, Men with a poor fund of knowledge and a heinous character speak nonsensically. Fearing such rascals, Lord Ramachandra abandoned his wife, Sita Devi, although she was pregnant. Thus Sita Devi went to the ashram of Valmiki Muni.
Thank you, Len. Let's check in if anybody else would like to read, and if not, you can continue, Len. Would anybody else like to read, starting with text 11?
I'll read from Prabhupada's house.
Okay, Hare Krishna.
All right, text 11, Hare Krishna. Tarvatya gate kale yamosa susure satao kushalava itikyatao tayus chakre kri yamuni. When the time came, the pregnant mother Sita Devi gave birth to twin sons, later celebrated as Lava and Kusha. The ritualistic ceremonies for their birth were performed by Valmiki Muni. I'm going to just go to the translation. O Maharaj Parikshit, Lord Lakshman had two sons named Angada and Chitraketu, and Lord Bharat also had two sons named Taksha and Pushkala. Text 13:14 is, let's see, Satraguna had two sons named Subahu and Shustrasena. When Lord Bharat went to conquer all directions, he had to kill many millions of Gandharvas, who are generally pretenders. Taking all their wealth, he offered it to Lord Ramachandra. Shatraguna also killed a Rakshasa named Lavana, who was the son of Madhu Rakshasa. Thus, he established in the great forest known as Madhuvana the town known as Mathura. Text 15. Translation. Being forsaken by her husband, Sita Devi entrusted her two sons to the care of Valmiki Muni. Then, meditating upon the lotus feet of the Lord Ramachandra, she entered into the earth. Purport. It was impossible for Sita Devi to live in separation from Lord Ramachandra. Therefore, after entrusting her two sons to the care of Valmiki Muni, she entered into the earth. Text 16, translation. After hearing the news of Mother Sita's entering the earth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead was certainly aggrieved. Although he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, upon remembering the exalted qualities of Mother Sita, he could not check his grief in transcendental love. Purport. Lord Ramachandra's grief at the news of Sita Devi's entering the earth is not to be considered material. In the spiritual world also there are feelings of separation, but such feelings are considered spiritual bliss. Grief and separation exist even in the absolute, but such feelings of separation in the spiritual world are transcendently blissful. Such feelings are a sign of Tasha Prema Vashatva Svabhava, being under the influence of Vladini Shakti and being controlled by love. In the material world, such feelings of separation are only a perverted reflection. Text 17, translation. The attraction between man and woman, or male and female, always exists everywhere, making everyone always fearful. Such feelings are present even among the controllers like Brahma and Lord Shiva, and is the cause of fear for them, what to speak of others who are attached to household life in this material world. Purport. As explained above, when the feelings of love and transcendental bliss from the spiritual world are pervertedly reflected in this material world, they're certainly the cause of bondage. As long as men feel attracted to women in this material world, and women feel attracted to men, the bondage of repeated birth and death will continue. But in the spiritual world, where there's no fear of birth and death, such feelings of separation are the cause of transcendental bliss. In the absolute reality, there are varieties of feelings, but all of them are the same quality of transcendental bliss. I'll read one more. Verse 18, the translation. After Mother Sita entered the earth, Lord Ramachandra observed complete celibacy and performed an uninterrupted Agnihotra Yana for 13,000 years. Hare Krishna.
Krishna. Thank you, Lakshmi Priya. Would anybody else like to continue reading from text 19?
Hare Krishna. This is Parampara. Are you having any discussion, or you wanted to read a certain amount first?
It's it's pretty fluid. I imagine that we'll read until like 8:45 or so, and then open it up for discussion.
All right, I'll be around then. Hare Krishna.
Oh, I see. I thought you were going to read. Well, do you have anything that you'd like to mention now, Parampara?
Yes, sure. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So these Lord Ramachandra's pastimes, and it's so we just read the parts of him abandoning Sita, his wife. So this is like a big. It's a mystery, actually. Or it can be a mystery. I mean, it could be straightforward if you just read it the way it is. But then, it's a big deal for a lot of people, especially women, and to understand, like, why did Ram do Ram rejected his wife after rescuing her, and it's an issue for like women's feminism and women's rights, things like that, and so because Ram is supposed to be the ideal, he is the ideal husband, he's the ideal man, the ideal father, the ideal husband, the ideal king. It's like he's coming, this incarnation is like he's just the ideal embodiment of a human being in all those different roles too. So it's like the ideal husband, because Sita was so chaste, was so she didn't succumb to Ravana's advances or wishes or desires. She was very chaste and faithful to Ram while she was in Ravana's care like that. And so and still he rejected her. So it's very painful. And just for me, I just want to share my personal, because I have gone to some different places with this pastime and how to understand it. And I think one thing that I heard some devotees speaking about it recently in an interview, and this devotee was emphasizing that, like, well, this is the Ramayana. It's like the transcendental pastime, and also it's, you know, the mood or the flavor of it, it's like a tragedy. It's actually it's a tragic story. There's so much tragedy and upheaval and pain, and so it's not one of Krishna's pastimes in the mood of, you know, sweetness and happily ever after kind of thing, you know. I mean, it is happily ever after because it's transcendental and it's the supreme personality of Godhead, but it's in the mood of this, like, this tragedy. And so there's pain and there's suffering and there's like that. And so it gives us an opportunity to meditate on that and to have that taste, the flavor of the Lord's pastimes in tragedy. And so it's like it's a different bhakti. It's a different, it's a different taste of the bhakti there. And the devotion between, Ram and Sita is a different flavor. I think if it was, one thing of it, it's like, because there's a mysterious quality to it. It's not just so clear cut. It's not so easy to understand. I think if it was like a straightforward story, straightforward pastime, just like, well, here's the answer, here's the reason why, and it's easy to accept and easy to understand, we may not need to go as deep. I've found, like, really going deeper into the pastime to understand, like, really understand, like, Ram's heart and Sita's heart, and what was that like for them. And so it's like these kind of mysterious, hard to understand aspects of the pastime, is an opportunity for us to really go deeper in our meditation and into the pastimes to really understand. And just when I'm just hearing this, just from this part, a place that I went, a little, different place that I, experienced is, I mean, I've had this experience before, but it was like, Lord Rama was wanting to uphold the ideal standard of a husband, because he saw that his role as a king, he saw that maybe because of his example that he set, there was some degradation in society, and from this person that he heard from, his countrymen, his citizen, and that, relating it to him, that maybe there's some lowering of the standard, and at least that was out there. And so to uphold the standard of society, he sacrificed his own, gratification or whatever, because he is Sita is so special to him. I just heard one devotee say that, the Sita is captured by Ravana. Lord Ram can have so many queens and so many, wives. If he wanted to, he could manifest, he's God, he could just manifest one. But even just Ram in the pastime, he could have so many other wives, but he goes through so much trouble because of this one Sita. That's his devotion for this one Sita. So he has that so much, but he's willing to give that up to uphold the ideal standard of a king and a man, and like for society, he's willing to sacrifice that. And then whenever this reading, what I was really getting was the mood of the love and separation. And it's I never really connected with that as much, in Lord Rama's pastimes, because we emphasize it with the gopis and Krishna, love and separation. And Lord Chaitanya had that mood of separation and like that painful yearning and longing to be with the Lord, but I'm so far away, I'm so separate. Like George Harrison, I'm so far away, I really want to know you, I really want to love you. And but not so much the love in Lord Rama's pastimes with Sita's, that for a good portion of the pastimes they're separate. And Sita's with Ravana, or then Sita's exiled, sent to the forest, and but still, and how we and that was also an issue with me with the gopis, because I was like, well, Krishna leaves Vrindavan in the pastimes. If I just look at the story of the of the Vrindavan, it's like Krishna leaves Vrindavan. He's not even with the gopis for much of his pastimes. He's doing other things. Like that's kind of tragic in a way, and the gopis are always longing. But then later on, and as you go into the pastimes, that we learn and we understand that Krishna says, actually, I would never left Vrindavan, because when the gopis are meditating on Krishna in their heart and longing for him, that mood of separation, he's always with them. He's always with them in their hearts. And he's always, they're seeing him in the forest, so he actually never left Vrindavan because he never left their hearts. And so I think that you could look at the same way in this pastime that, okay, Sita and Ram were never separated because of that, because Ram was always in Sita's heart, and like vice versa, even with Ravana, or even whenever the forest, when she's sent away, and then just hearing just now just how much Ram is moved by his his emotions and his feelings for Sita to do such big austerity, after she leaves, she returns to the earth. So anyway, that's I just want to share that. That's a little bit like a little bit deeper, different place I went to, hearing this part of the pastime this time. And it's always something that I really relish hearing about, and hearing other devotees feelings on it too, because it can be like controversial. It can evoke strong feelings and emotions and trigger things, and I think that's it's a good opportunity to have something like that. It's not just so straightforward and clear cut. It's like, it brings up stuff, and we get to look at it, and we get to go deeper into the pastimes. Thank you for letting me share at this time.
Hare Krishna Parampara, thank you for sharing. I like your point about it not being so straightforward, at least to our perception, it not being so straightforward, how this invites further inquiry. And I'm glad that you've gotten like a deeper look, a deeper experience this time around. I'm really happy to hear that. And yeah, like some of the points that you made, like with this is a tragedy. I like the way that you described it. I haven't read either the Mahabharata or the Ramayana, but I've heard the Mahabharata described as a drama, like a transcendental soap opera. And then now you're describing the Ramayana as like a transcendental tragedy. And it just reminds me of how, in a way, those are things that I think we're drawn to. And so how I think it's so generous of Krishna to give us these different flavors of, maybe we can call it entertainment, transcendental entertainment, fungicational entertainment, in these different moods, so that we can hear about the Lord in these different flavors. Like in one of the purports that we read recently, it talked about how there's a variegatedness of emotion, of feeling in the spiritual world, and it's all one in quality. It's all some variation of spiritual bliss. And so I hear that in your sharing. This is one flavor of transcendental bliss. That's the flavor of tragedy. And then I also want to comment when you mentioned that, Ramachandra sacrificed so much to uphold the highest standard, and kind of like maybe a slightly different way that I want to describe it. It's not so much that he lowered the standard and so he needed to do this to compensate. It's more, in the purport it said something like that there are some people that basically speak nonsense or think nonsense. And so for me, it's not like that the standard was lowered and so he needed to do this to like make up for it. It's because of the people's nonsensical way of understanding things, that he decided, this is my understanding, that he decided to go through this sacrifice, not because the standard itself needed to be remediated, but because kind of he got that this is how people are going to interpret it wrong. People are going to misinterpret what's going on. And so to help people that don't know how to interpret transcendental stuff, I'm going to do this thing so that there's less room for them to bring in the error of their own mental calculations. This is how I understood what we've read so far.
Hare Krishna, I appreciate the conversation very much. Thank you both, Parampara and Eze. Yes, yeah, so it's clear, like in this act, in this pastime, Ramachandra has no ill feelings or animosity towards Sita. That's a very, the sweetest, transcendental, loving, affectionate feelings. And so generally speaking, kind of like, like Krishna is kind of known, like, he does out things. Krishna generally or often does things outside of standard morality, the whole dancing with the gopis things, even from the early age, stealing butter, stuff like that. And then Ramachandra is more like the strict moral, the perfect moral example. And then this could seem like, well, this is kind of an exception to that. And there are other apparent exceptions in Ramachandra's pastimes. For example, when I've not read the Ramayana, I just pretty much know what Prabhupada gave, heard a few lectures here and there from some other devotees, a few talks, but when Ramachandra killed Vali from behind the back, like a very un-Kshatriya way to kill Vali. Why did he kill Vali? Was a monkey warrior who was opposing Sugriva. So there's a few times in Ramayana where Ramachandra's like, well, that doesn't look conventionally moral and a real example of strong character. And okay, so in this, I appreciate what you shared, Eze, and it's right. That point, Shukadeva Goswami said, these are nonsense people. These are nonsense people who would even say something like that about Ramachandra being henpecked and Sita Devi being unchaste. So the Bhagavatam makes it clear, this is nonsense. All right, so then we can go to, well, why would Lord Ramachandra care about people who are nonsense like that? So for me, it's reminiscent of the pastime with Lord Chaitanya. And Lord Chaitanya, well, sometimes I get his wife's names. I think his first wife was Vishnupriya, who died of separation. Then I think his second wife was Lakshmi Priya, I believe. And so also for Lord Chaitanya, he was 24. We can imagine Lakshmi Priya was younger, maybe a teenager. And then also, so then Lord Chaitanya, it's for me, there's similarities to these pastimes. Not that I have a deep understanding, and there's so much nuance and depth, and there's so much history about why Lord Ramachandra did that, nuances in the Ramayana. But so Lord Chaitanya had some in the student class, and sometimes they would be disrespectful towards him, and they were mocking him, and they had some nonsense conceptions. They didn't understand why Lord Chaitanya, he was Nimai Pandit at the time, why he was so absorbed in the gopis. And anyhow, so I think they got into fights with Lord Chaitanya, with Nimai Pandit. Okay, so they were also nonsense, as is this citizen of Ayodhya who's speaking in such way about Ram and Sita. So why do such personalities as Nimai Pandit, Lord Ramachandra care about these nonsense opinions? And so an important distinction is, like, it's not like, out of need of approval, like we in our material weakness, I want people to think good of me and say good things and approve of me, and I just want to be liked. So it's not that. At the same time, Nimai Pandit, Lord Chaitanya, he was thinking, okay, like, I got a mission here. I got a mission. And you can see some people, they're not going to take me seriously. And so what he did, he took sannyas, and he left his wife, and that's whole pastimes described in Chaitanya. He took sannyas at the very young age of 24. So this is not something to imitate, but it was because, like, okay, because sannyas at that day was kind of like, okay, like if someone's teaching something and someone has a PhD today, it's like, oh, a PhD. Okay. So a lot of people will respect that. So Lord Chaitanya, he not just took sannyas, he took Mayavad sannyas. I mean, it's like really far out. He didn't even take Vaishnav sannyas. He took Mayavad sannyas because at that time, Vaishnav sannyas wasn't so respected for various reasons. So he actually took Mayavad sannyas in a Shankaracharya parampara. And he did it to kind of have his like PhD, and then people would listen to him. And so even though like, yeah, those who were influenced by Mayavad or those who were criticizing him, they were nonsense. So, and of course his strategy was effective, but just like that was the psychology, that was the transcendental psychology behind his strategy. And there are many, similar to what you shared, parampara, there are many who know a bit about Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. They criticize that aspect, like, from a point of view of feminism or whatever it is, like, oh, that was irresponsible. Okay, so, all right, so I see with Lord Ramachandra, it's the same as you indicated, or at least this is a prime understanding that's pretty apparent here. Yeah, that so he had no animosity towards Sita Devi, just like Lord Chaitanya had only affection for Lakshmi Priya. But Lord Ramachandra said, okay, to do my service, not that I want to pander out of some insecurity to public opinion, but at the same time to do my service, yeah, I want the citizens to have this respect. So this is going to be a move that's going to support that. And so just wanted to share that aspect and just that connection between, let's call it Lord Ramachandra in the form of Lord Chaitanya doing something similar. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, dear. And yeah, I mean, I see it as an act of pure love for all of us, that like, okay, if I do this thing, then there's a better chance that some more people will get it, will hear my message, will understand. Like, for me, it helps me like that. There's no arbitrary right or wrong that's set separate from whatever God and whatever Krishna does in his various manifestations. Kind of like that is the perfect thing to do in that situation, just because like by default, like Krishna in any of his manifestations can't do something that's irresponsible. That's like, that would be from our own limited calculation to say, oh, this was irresponsible, from my own individual, somewhat arbitrary, definitely flawed calculation. This was irresponsible. That like, for me, any such argument kind of loses its potency very quickly. If we consider, well, it's kind of like your opinion against what God did, so probably like he's got the upper hand here. So that just for me kind of helps to like blanket thwart any kind of like you mentioned, some people criticize Lord Chaitanya. I'm like, well, who is any person to criticize Lord Chaitanya? Or like some people criticize Lord Ramachandra, like, well, who is any person to criticize Lord Ramachandra? For me, it's more a question of, okay, let me try to understand how come this makes sense, rather than to prove, no, this doesn't make sense, it should have been different. So that's just what came up for me in your sharing, dear.
Thank you, Eze. I just thought, following up on what you shared, there's one conversation, I'll be slightly paraphrasing, but basically, well, maybe it's after a lecture, there's questions and discussion. And I'm pretty sure it was India, or maybe in the West, with an Indian group. And okay, so one Indian fellow, he says, he says to Prabhupada, why does Krishna dance with other people's wives? So Prabhupada replied, why are you dancing with Krishna's wife? So Prabhupada's just, responding edgy way, giving that perspective that all the women and all the men, we're all Krishna's. So you're thinking your wife is your wife, but actually she's Krishna's wife. So just to give that like kind of, who are we to question Krishna? So Prabhupada responded in the same vein that I understood your sharing. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Dara. I want to read a story that it's a Ramayana story that a devotee posted on Facebook, and I don't know the exact source, but it sounds very similar to a story that I've heard in our group being discussed. So this is a story about a little squirrel who was helping Ramachandra whenever he was building the bridge. And yeah, so it's described that all the monkeys were pulling out humongous rocks to build this bridge, and they're working very hard. And Lord Ramachandra was very pleased. He was looking at how hard they were working, their sincerity, and there was also this small, well, maybe it was a regular sized squirrel, but relatively to the monkeys, it's a small squirrel. And so it was going up and down carrying pebbles in its mouth, and it could only carry like a very limited number of pebbles in its mouth. And so at one point, the squirrel happened to be in the way of the monkey, and kind of the monkey moved out of the way and said, "Oh, be careful. You could be hurt around here." Eventually, it escalated into like, "Okay, really, you're in my way, and if you think you're trying to help, you're just kind of like you're actually just getting in the way." And the squirrel insisted, like, "No, I'm gonna, I love Lord Ramachandra, and he needs this bridge, and so I want to do everything that I can." And the monkey was like, "You're being silly," and like flung the squirrel, and the squirrel was screaming Ramachandra's name, and then Ramachandra caught the squirrel and was holding it. So I imagine that was already very blissful for the squirrel. And then Ramachandra, Lord Rama, he got furious with the monkeys. He was saying, "Okay, you're brave and strong, and that's awesome. And I appreciate, paraphrasing here, and I appreciate you using these qualities in my service. But for me, it's really not about the strength, and it's not about the bravery, and it's not about what you're actually doing. For me, it's about the love, the quantity of love that you do it with." And this squirrel has so much love, but even practically, like, don't you realize the pebbles in the sand, they go in the cracks of all the big boulders that you're putting. So they're making the bridge stronger. They're giving it structure and binding the rocks together. And you're foolishly flinging him around. And then eventually the monkeys became very ashamed and aggrieved, and they noticed sort of what they were doing. And then the moral of the story is like the verse in Bhagavad Gita that says, whatever you offer, you can offer I don't know if it's like a flower or a leaf or some water to do it with love, to do it with love. And so whatever we do, whether it's so-called big or not, that it's really not about, because that's already such a limited perspective, the idea of like, oh, well, it's about what I'm doing materially. And it's like, really, like, Krishna doesn't need anything. Krishna could instantaneously make the bridge appear. He could instantaneously teleport there. He could instantaneously kind of just poof whatever outcome he wanted, but like that's not the point. And in the same way, Lord Ramachandra, he didn't need people to build the bridge for him. He could have done it faster and better on his own. But it's to give an opportunity to devotees to engage in service. And so again, Krishna doesn't need any actual material thing. It's to give us an opportunity to give our love a vehicle with which to express itself. So it's not about, oh, how much water I give to Krishna. It's about how much love do I give the water, whether it's a drop or whether it's a cup or a gallon or whatever it is, or if I carry the pebble or if I carry the biggest rock. It's really just a vehicle by which to express my love, by which to express our love unto him. So that story really really touched me, and I wanted to share it. And we sort of have begun already discussion, but now I'll open it up more for discussion. If anybody wants to share or ask or comment or mention. Gajendra?
All right, Krishna, I feel like I've been swimming in brilliant, sparkling waters, listening to everybody talk since Patrick began. And it's all been just wonderfully relatable. I just wanted to make a short comment, maybe slightly left field, and something that you actually touched upon in relation to the various pastimes of the Lord and his devotees. Of course, there's, deeper and more direct relations. And for example, Ram and Sita, there's the truth and depth of the brilliant love and intricacy of relationship that exists there, and the understanding that the devotees may have about it. What the Lord is in everyone's heart also, and equal to everyone. So in the maybe farther away, more nether regions of less understanding, these pastimes, and you touched upon something similar to this, Eze, but these pastimes, can be heard by everyone according to their understanding. And human beings, being what they are and diverse, are going to respond different ways. For example, there's people that hear about Krishna dancing with the gopis or having 16,000 wives, and one's human embodied soul may respond like, oh, this is, as you mentioned, like, terrible. That sounds immoral. And they're having their reaction. I know people who would think, wow, Krishna really is attractive. That's very wonderful. How's he pulling this off? I want to learn more about Krishna. So, these pastimes are going to land with each soul, individually, and they serve purposes like that, and as you mentioned, there is the difference of maybe emphasis to different incarnations or aspects of the Godhead. And Lord Ram was, definitely emphasizing the part of the great king for his people. And this is where I'm going to go a little farther into left field. But in terms of the Lord being willing to relate to individuals, it's a very, very merciful. I see it as something very, very merciful. And I'm a little reluctant to go here, but it's like, I think about it. It's really bizarre. And there is a devotee who is really like interested in, I mean, really like a devotee, like a Haribol, Hare Krishna devotee of Prabhupada and Krishna. And he is a Nazi Hitler sympathizer glorifier also. And I'm thinking, this is kind of bizarre from my point of view, but whether it's something that the guru may say that somebody can latch onto from the unusual uniqueness, or how the pastimes of the Lord may land on a particular individual. Like there's societies where, oh my gosh, it's awful. There's like honor killings. And an example of, Lord Ram can actually be relatable for certain people and provide just something for them to relate to, just to consider, just to even start the path of considering the pastimes of the Lord, agreeably or disagreeably, that there is an element of mercy and connection between them and the Lord, but through these stories. So I don't know if that's comprehensible or not, but I wanted to lay it out there because I see it.
Hare Krishna, thank you, Gajendra. The way that I'm making sense of some of the essence that you're saying is, yeah, that Krishna can speak to anyone no matter where they're at. Whether they were born into the Krishna consciousness movement, or whether they're a Nazi sympathizer, or whether they're whatever, that Krishna can touch anyone, can touch anyone and everyone. And like how we sometimes talk that Krishna will appear at different times in different forms and speak to people to meet them where they're at. Okay, that sometimes Krishna does this by appearing in a certain age, in a certain form, and giving a certain message, like, okay, at a certain time, appearing as Buddha and giving the pseudo philosophy to get people away from an even more incorrect way to interpret philosophy. So sometimes it's by appearing in different manifestations, and sometimes this can happen with the same message or the same pastime. And yeah, perhaps whenever we talk about these pastimes, we'll consider the transcendental love or the transcendental bliss of separation, or whatever, each of us here. And even someone like, yeah, for me, it's hard to imagine how the Nazi and the sympathizer and Krishna sympathizer, how those can go together, other than, yeah, Krishna can touch anyone no matter where they're at. And so perhaps the message that person gets, perhaps it's not like the full extent of love of Godhead and love of other beings, but yeah, that they can still get some value, some message, that can be the seed of love for Krishna, or even like love for other human beings, or other beings in general, rather. Perhaps that's what they get from this pastime. And so, yeah, Krishna will meet people where they're at, sometimes by appearing in different forms, and sometimes through the same pastime, the same story. For one person, it's one message, and for somebody else, it's a very different message. But what is it? Krishna, something like Krishna accomplishes many purposes with every action. So this is how I'm making sense of your sharing, Gajendra.
Yeah, that seems pretty right. Strange but true. And but I'm glad I'm really kind of relating to what everybody else said. It's just nectar. So grateful to be here.
Hare Krishna. Len?
Yes, thank you. So I realize that in my own mind, I'm not intelligent enough to understand this particular pastime at the end of the Ramayana, with what's happening with Sita and being abandoned like that. But I accept that somehow there's some rationale or a rationalization that will make sense to somebody, but I'm not intelligent enough to make sense of it. I know you guys are trying to, twist it in some way that makes it acceptable, but I'm not able to grasp it. But I did want to make a comment, though, about the Rasa dance, and it was a rationalization that made a lot of sense to me and helped me to accept it. This idea that, oh, well, Krishna is dancing with other men's wives, that can't be accepted. So I don't know where I read this, but it was somebody had written that in the Rasa dance, that the gopis did not physically leave their husbands to go dance with Krishna. Their bodies were still laying there with their husbands, but they their astral bodies, perhaps might say, or they had astrally projected just their consciousness to go and dance with Krishna while their bodies still lay there with their husbands. So that that might answer some people's objections to Krishna dancing with other people's wives. So that, but as far as Sita Ramachandra, disguising himself so he could hear what his countrymen are thinking about him, and then to me, giving into this nonsense talk about Sita, I can't make sense of it, but I'm okay. It's Shastra, it's written, so people that are more intelligent than me can maybe make sense of it, but I can certainly understand a lot of people's reaction to it seems totally bizarre, this pastime, but and this ending, how can it end so suddenly like this and so in this way? It's a complete mind f, if you will. It just it blows people's minds. But anyway, that's my 2 cents, and I'd like to hear from other people also. Thank you.
I really appreciate your honesty, Len. Like, yeah, like saying I don't get it. Like I love that, and I don't claim to have any intelligence to get it either. But kind of what can help me to feel okay with this pastime, for example, is to think of it as like, well, on their platform, this is like a play. Like Sita and Ram, they're constantly together in Vaikuntha, and they're like, all right, so we'll do this play. I'm gonna hear someone say a thing, and then I'm gonna vanquish you, and so then you'll go to the forest, and then at some point you'll like go into the earth, and then like I'll do the sacrifice. But like really, I mean, if we think about it, like in the level of existence where like it really matters in the spiritual world, they're constantly there together. So that this is one way that I can make sense of it, that like the stories that we're talking about, they're on our field of experience, they're on the material world where like, yeah, things are so temporary, and on the everlasting and the more substantial platform of the spiritual world, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what the pastimes are like there, but like we heard, everything is in transcendental bliss. So this is one way that I can make sense of it. I'm curious to hear from others, and also to hear from others about the astral projection thing that you mentioned. Thank you, Len. Anandini?
Yes, Hare Krishna. I'm fascinated by the different perspectives that you all offered on Ramachandra leaving or sending Sita away. And I'm curious to understand a lot more. And also about the aspect that like, so Sita is like the ideal woman, wife, and mother, and she left her babies. Like she decided to leave. And also Ramachandra, I don't know if he took care of his children, or so that's another aspect where I have some discomfort and questions about. And then I wanted to share also something about, I didn't attend yesterday, but I also read the same chapter, and like chapter 10. And there's this one verse towards the end where I just discovered or met my doubts, and I thought to express and perhaps hear some of your, or maybe you discussed about it too. But there's the verse 53 where it says that when Lord Ramchandra, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, was the king of this world, all bodily and mental suffering, disease, old age, bereavement, lamentation, distress, fear, and fatigue were completely absent. There was even no death for those who did not want it. And then in the purport, Srila Prabhupada describes that we can create the same atmosphere today in Kali Yuga through the chanting of the holy name. And when I read it, I just felt really moved and inspired and attracted. And then also this doubt. So, okay, is this really true? You know, like I see just in this community here or other spiritual communities, I don't know a community where no one is suffering, where no one is experiencing some kind of illness or tiredness or discomfort. And is it all like, does it lead to back because the chanting is not pure? Or is it what? Yeah, it's just a doubt I have that it comes up again and again. I'm curious to hear some perspectives.
I'm also very curious. I appreciate your point in sharing this doubt, and I can find the same doubt in myself. I'd be curious to hear from somebody. Does somebody exist here who doesn't have the doubt?
Or has cultivated the doubt and found different responses? Because I see it's already progress that I embrace this doubt and I express it, that this doubt is here.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, these are, just very strong statements in Ram Raja. All bodily and mentally suffering, disease, old age, bereavement, lamentation, distress, fear, and fatigue were completely absent. There was even no death for those who did not want it. Similar things are said in Bhagavatam about when Maharaj Yudhisthira, which is a lot more recent, was ruling. So, I mean, I just to see it in a straightforward way, right? Okay, so Lord Ramachandra, okay, he had this potency. We're not going to imitate that. Just like, okay, like when Prabhupada comments on the Lord Chaitanya's Jari Kanda forest pastime. Lord Chaitanya's going, he's getting the elephants to dance, and the tigers and the deer, instead of violence, they're kissing each other and embracing each other, and they're all chanting. So I trust that. And then Srila Prabhupada says, we can't expect to be potent like Lord Chaitanya. But okay, let's give our 100% effort, at least to get the human beings to chant God's names. Okay, so if we just look in like kind of like the continuum, like, okay, what Lord Ramachandra was able to inspire, it was literally Vaikuntha. And even if we think of like in ways that are, let's say, even if, okay, because we're talking about government here. Okay, so even if, let's say a substantial number of the governmental, political, corporate leaders internationally, in the United States, in Switzerland, around the world, a substantial number, let's not even talk about Hare Krishna. Let's just say they became like, yeah, let's not kill the animals unnecessarily. And they all started promoting vegetarianism. Let's just look at that, okay? And they said, yeah, and in our personal habits, yeah, we're going to give up all intoxication, drinking and smoking and like that, and that's, and like the leader, whether the leaders in sports or entertainment or government, let's just say like even just sattvic principles. Well, okay. And then many people would be influenced by those in leadership positions. Okay, and then there's less animal slaughter. Okay, then there would be less material suffering. Okay, there would be less material suffering. Let's not even talk about transcendence. So, Lord Ramachandra's example is described here in the 10th chapter of the 9th canto. That's just like, way at the top of the continuum and off the charts. But we can, at least I can conceive like, yeah, I get it, because like even if, and then Prabhupada, in that particular purport, he's talking about, yeah, so if we chant Hare Krishna and just bring the consciousness, from tamas and rajas to sattva, to transcendence, giving our full effort. And if there's a critical mass of us, we really like make it, or even just see what Prabhupada on his own did in terms of chanting the names of God, in terms of vegetarianism, in terms of so many things. Yeah, then there will be less material disturbances as we come out of lower modes towards sattva, towards transcendence, and maybe as important or more important, still material work. Because Ramachandra, he just turned it into Vaikuntha. He can do that. But okay, still there's material disturbances. Still there's material disturbances. And then we become, we meaning ourselves or society, our neighbors, we become less disturbed by the disturbances, that things aren't good, but we're not reacting to the disturbances with envy and depression that requires heavy medication and fear and insecurity. We're responding to the disturbances with a view towards self-realization, or at least sattvic compassion for ourselves and empathy for others. So I don't know if I see it on the continuum. Yeah, I see that me personally, on a day-to-day basis, if I have more sattvic habits, then I'm more relieved of disturbances, or just more peaceful in the face of the disturbances. And I see that for others too. And if I'm chanting attentively, chanting rounds and sharing that with others, then there's less material disturbances and more transcendence to those that are still there. So, and so I know, that's my thoughts. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, dear. And then in reading the purport again, kind of what you're saying begins to make sense, as the final sentence says, the kingdom of Rama was immensely popular and beneficial, and the spreading of the Hare Krishna movement can immediately introduce a similar situation. So what I think of is, so in math, in geometry, the term similar, for example, if you're describing shapes, similar shapes, it means they'll have the same proportions, like all the angles will be the same, but for example, they could have different sizes. So you could have a similar triangle with the same angles that's ginormous, and one that is very small. And so I'm remembering Achintya Veda Veda Tattva, how we can introduce a similar situation in terms of the similar qualities, perhaps in different quantity. So kind of like how dear saying, we might not have all bodily mental suffering, et cetera, but we might have a situation where there's less or some bodily and mental suffering, et cetera, where partially absent rather than completely absent. So this is now how you helped me, at least, to make sense. It's a similar situation, not the exact same situation.
Thanks for that, Eze, including the geometry metaphor. As you were thinking, you were speaking, I was thinking of the term asymptote, and I just got it. It probably comes from that root, similar, like an asymptote becomes more and more similar. Hare Krishna.
I appreciate your follow-up mathematical analogy. Thanks, dear. And I wonder, Anandini, if any of this touches on what you were saying.
Yes, very much. Yeah, I get a lot from what both of you shared. And I also get insights about where my doubts come from. So thank you.
Haribol.
Hare Krishna. I'm not sure it's relevant, but it seems that during the reign of Ramachandra, when he was on the planet, there was suffering, because Mantara, she was so envious and fearful and suffering. And that's why she tried to manipulate Kake to have Bharat as a king. So it seems that sometimes there is statement like that in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Bhagavatam, where everybody will be happy, or everyone will be liberated. But I'm sensing that often I'm not understanding those statements personally, because does that everyone means everyone really? Because apparently there was suffering during the time Ramachandra was on the planet. Even he's in his own environment, in his own direct family members. So I don't know if it's relevant, but it's something that came up for me.
Hare Krishna, thank you, Malini. Yes, so that maybe reintroduces the doubt on a different level. Like, oh, well, what about the statement in general? The one distinction that maybe I can make sense is my understanding when that pastime was happening, Lord Ramachandra wasn't yet the king. He was maybe like scheduled to be the king. And I don't know about what happens after this verse, but at least this verse says that when Lord Ramachandra, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, was the king of this world, all of those relief of misery was happening. So I don't know if maybe there's a distinction of time between some of those situations that you mentioned. But yes, I always also seem to find seeming contradictions like the ones that you named. So now I have another one. Thanks, Mom.
Hare Krishna, this is Ladini. Well, also after Rama is the king, then there also like he has to give up Sita because of the envy of the citizens. And this man was blaspheming his wife because she cheated on him. So it doesn't seem like a very happy thing either. So that would seem that it's not about like Rama being the king or before him being prince. So I have also this doubt. One thing that comes to me is that during the like Lord Ramachandra appeared in Treta Yuga. So generally in Treta Yuga, people live long lives. There's much less suffering and like disease and like that. So maybe it's relative, like you use the geometry, like similar. So relatively for Kali Yuga less suffering, and relatively for Treta Yuga less suffering is probably quite a very different thing. But like what I can like relate most is what Dira Govinda Prabhu shared about the consciousness, like the pure devotee consciousness is not in, like is not like in like not affected by whatever is happening in the matter. So that's how I would probably most understand it, even though I don't like it because that doesn't really help me.
Hare Krishna, thank you, Ladini. I'm moved by your honesty to say like, well, I'd like something practical. The whole not being disturbed by the disturbances thing is not immediately accessible to me. Yes, and I can personally relate. So and yes, so you pointed out this, even after Lord Ramachandra was king, there was this incident with this husband and wife, and well, kind of that seems like there was maybe some suffering going on there, some conflict. So then what does the purport mean? And is it relative? Is it absolute? One thing that it seems that we all can agree on is that maybe we're not 100% clear. Gajendra, I see you've had your hand raised. You want to share?
Yeah, boy, I'm ever more fascinated listening to everybody. My hand went up quite a while ago, but as I've been listening, my thoughts have kind of moved from the actual contemplation of the pastimes to contemplating everyone else here in the Sangha, and just trying to ponder my understanding of what your experience is in expressing these sort of wonderings and doubts and questions, and what's the meaning of that? That's probably actually a little more confusing for me. I did want to respond a little bit to what Len had brought up, and I don't have anything super, authoritative regarding things like astral bodies. There are some things that I can say, but I want to say when it comes to that, there's always more information available and more perspective. And even like with Sita, for example, there's the idea that she had like a false form that Robin was with and things like that. So it can get more. There can be more information. As far as like astral projection, I don't know necessarily that there's anything like, well, this is the way it happened. All the gopis were in the homes or in the beds with their husband or however it was, and it was just all happening on some more mental or subtle plane. I haven't really heard about the rasa dance one way or the other. I could say it's possible that maybe there's gopis at different levels, and for some of them they were there and on an astral level participating or witnessing. I can tell you though, more authoritatively, I can't necessarily quote the exact source right now, but if somebody doubts, I would get the reference that Radha and Krishna were definitely meeting, and she was definitely leaving the house as part of the pastimes. That part of what was happening in the mornings after the night and the forest hours was transcendental anxiety about getting them back to their homes, and how different gopis would play and intercept and hurry along, get them awake, things like that. Even the arti ceremony that we perform with the different paraphernalia of incense and water and cloth and flowers. This is actually not just about like offering back elements of the earth to the source. It's actually related to the pastime like that. Like the water is actually washing them and getting them cleaned up in the morning, and the cloth is actually getting their garments back together. So it's not like there's no, if one is wanting the refuge of saying, because it on the it didn't really happen on the material plane, therefore there was no violation of some moral code on the base level. That's not going to work. It was happening. I think what dear Govinda brought up, how Prabhupada responded to that man one time. I hadn't heard that before, but that I really, really appreciated how he turned that around, and telling him like, well, how are you dancing with, why are you dancing with Krishna's wife? And that's all. I just know that these things are really happening, and that we don't want to, I guess the right word might be, anthropomorphize God, like just because something might be immoral for us, that we want to put that on God. Or, we may be a mother and have our children, and it would be so right for us. The last thing we would ever want to do is, leave our babies. But so those things can, provoke or prick us to contemplation, but I don't think anyone here is doing it. But I think we definitely want to be, just remain in a place of, openness and learning as we contemplate these things, and hopefully just stay in a place where these, questions don't take the form of destructive doubts. It concerns me because I've seen these things happen before. I'll stop there.
Hare Krishna, Gajendra, I appreciate your care for our Sangha and wanting to support. The experience of how I'm hearing it is that you would hope these doubts become the cause of further inquiry and curiosity rather than a distancing or a loss of trust of Shastra. Appreciate that point.
I just want to share. I want to read something from Srila Prabhupada. Yeah, I regard Gajendra's point as so important because this is something that makes the gopis the topmost devotees, the gopis, so that they're for Krishna, their love of Krishna, that they're abandoning anything from our conventional point of view would would seem like they're giving that up. I mean, their social standing, just the gopis' love for Krishna. That's why it's like inconceivable. So we don't want to minimize that in any way. And just to confirm what Len shared, I'll read a few things from Srila Prabhupada. These are from lectures from Srila Prabhupada. This one is Canto 1, Chapter 5, Text 32, Vrindavan, August 13th, 1974. And in reading this, just emphasizing Gajendra's point, we don't want in any way to minimize why the gopis are special amongst the special devotees. Okay, so Prabhupada says, actually they are eternal associates of Krishna, the gopis. They are not ordinary women. There are all descriptions in the Srimad Bhagavatam. They were dancing in their spiritual body, not in the material body. They were dancing in their spiritual body. Their material body was lying down with their husband. These descriptions are there in the Bhagavatam. So Gopi's Leela is not material. So there was no question of contamination. But material, this kind of activities to dance at dead of night with young girl, that is not permitted. Next, Srimad Bhagavatam lecture from Prabhupada, Bombay, January 6, 1975, on 3.26.29. Prabhupada says, they are all spiritual. Krishna's this enjoyment is not material. They are explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam that when the gopis came to Krishna, they came in their spiritual body. The material body was lying down with their husband. The husband could not know that my wife has gone to Krishna. These are explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam. One more, Prabhupada gave a lecture in Nairobi, October 27th, 1975, Srimad Bhagavatam 3.28.18. Prabhupada says, when Krishna was dancing, all the gopis, they left their material body by the side of the husband, but they went to dance. That is spiritual body, that is not material body. So don't indulge in such a way that Krishna's dancing and our dancing is the same. Then you will be mistaken, that will be offense. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I have a question. It's about what dear Govinda just read. I don't remember if it's in the Nectar of Devotion or Krishna book, but it describes that some of the gopis, they were trying to leave to join Krishna and the Rasa dance at night, but their husband and family ties them down and locks them in a room. And because they were locked down in a room, then they left their bodies. They committed suicide. They just die of sorrow and separation. And so it seems that there is so many aspects to that conversation as Gajendra and Len have brought about, because there is also those examples that the gopis were prevented from going And so it's not like their body were with their husband and then their spiritual body left, and then they couldn't even withstand the separation of not joining in with Krishna.
I personally have nothing that I can say to that. I know nothing about the rasa dance. So I phone a friend. Dira, back to you.
Oh, well, I just see Malini kind of responded to her question that, because like even there's Lakshmi Sahasra Saptasam Brahma Sevyamanam, that there's hundreds and thousands of gopis. So it's not like, yeah, I like your asymptote, that the similarity. So it's not like all gopis are one. So like there are some gopis who are descending from Goloka Vrindavan. Some gopis in their previous life, they did like bhakti and they were purified, but for some final training, they took birth in a planet where Krishna is performing his pastimes for some final training. And so there are gopis at different levels. It's not like all one consciousness. Like there's no impurity, but there's all one consciousness. So similarly, like, yeah, so like Malini referenced, I think, Nectar of Devotion, maybe his Krishna book. So we can imagine that of the hundreds and thousands of gopis that, that there's some who are like this, some manifest their pastimes like that, some were stopped by their family members and left their body from separation from Krishna, some are described in Prabhupada's words that we just read here. It's there's diversity and unlimited variety. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you. And we'll do one more comment, Ladini.
Hare Krishna. I was still back in thinking about how people didn't have to die when Ramachandra was ruling. And one thing that came to me that I want to share is that perhaps when Krishna was on the earth manifesting his pastimes, then we could like say the same sentence, like everyone was happy and there was no suffering and all that. But we know from the past times that like when the demon came, the cows and the women would be so afraid that they would all have miscarriage. And there was the killing of the babies by Kamsa and like so much hardship they all were going through. But it seems that because Krishna was present or Rama was present, it was like a minor thing. But
yeah. So I hear you speaking to like, okay, it was relative, like, okay, relatively it was insignificant, maybe even almost unnoticeable, relatively speaking, whatever suffering may have been going on. Oh, because Krishna's there. So like, tiny example, I stubbed my toe. Oh, but it doesn't matter because Krishna's there. Hard for me to personally relate. Oh, okay, my baby was abducted, but I guess that's fine because Krishna's around, and so I'm in transcendental bliss. You're saying something like this?
I cannot like completely relate either, but like, okay, to imagine like our political system, like they're like one rascal next to each other, and to imagine that there is like this one ruler who is like beautiful and taking care for all the citizens, and everyone is just like so much in love with him that it's probably like a different experience.
Yeah.
And Rama, now I actually remember one more thing, like Rama, like Brahman came to complain to Rama as a king that his son died. So again, there was probably death also, and not even for those who like didn't want it. Or
well, I actually did want to make a comment about that point because it does say there was no death even for those who didn't want it, and like I can think of like clear intention. It's like, well, maybe I'm saying I don't want death, but then maybe there's some part of me that that for whatever reason, maybe does want death, maybe because I am suffering, which would then maybe be a potential contradiction for the first part of the purport, or maybe because I'm eager to serve Krishna and whatever the next life would be, I don't know. But this is something that comes to mind, this, yeah, where is the wanting? Like the wanting may not be conscious, but it may be, it may still be there.
Yeah, like maybe we actually want to suffer.
Yes, maybe that also. Maybe, yeah, maybe maybe some person sees maybe a spiritual benefit in going through this suffering, or I don't know, maybe they think of it as a burning karma or some kind of austerity. I don't know.
I just want to say real quick, if I can, I think when I hear a lot of different statements, maybe scriptures or this or that, or things that sound kind of, fantastic, I think sometimes we want to construct things being said as if they're like in court, we want to like take this and like test the truth of it and make arguments. And it's not really about that. I think sometimes things are being conveyed because there's a particular message, there's a particular experience or a particular truth that's wanting to be conveyed. And the proper way to do that, sometimes statements are made that are just more conveying the experience, even if technically the statement is not 100%, absolute on a technical level. And I just personally don't get hung up about that. I mean, even Srila Prabhupada a lot of times will say something like an absolute truth, but that he knows that there's exceptions or this or that. And so I think that to be kind of true to the effectiveness or the message or the real meaning, things are said in such a way. And so whether there was some sickness or death at a certain time, and even in maybe a particular statement is saying that it wasn't there. It's more, I think you're supposed to really get into the energy of that statement, whatever the attractiveness of it is. And I could playfully say it's maybe a transcendental snow job meant to bring the soul closer or to attract the soul. But I don't personally see any fault in it. I get the feeling of what's being said, and that is the true truth about it.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Gajendra. Okay, final comment, Anandini.
Yeah, just something that came to my mind now, hearing the last sharings and looking at my own doubts and where they come from, is this when Chaitanya prays in the Sri Shikshastakam, or he prays or he expresses to Krishna that he's always his servant. I don't know the exact words, but he says, even if you handle me roughly, I'm not going to turn away. And that just came to my mind, that I can say for myself, I see a big motivation for spiritual endeavors is to get rid of suffering. I'm so tired of suffering. I'm tired of seeing others suffer. I'm tired of feeling suffering, pain. And so that's like a big motivation. And Lord Chaitanya, he's not bothering about suffering. His commitment is to serve Krishna no matter what. And yeah, I find that very strengthening and inspiring, a shift in perspective.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Anandini.
Thank you all for your sharings.
Yes. Thank you all. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Jai Hare Krishna.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Hare Krishna jai. Thank you, Eze.
Hare Krishna.